Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku had a sister with a dangerous quirk. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The sun was a benevolent god that day, spilling liquid gold over the small, manicured park. It was the kind of perfect afternoon that settles into memory like a pressed flower, fragrant and fragile. For 6-year-old Izuku Midoriya, it was paradise. He and his little sister, Hikari, were chasing ladybugs near a vibrant bed of prize-winning tulips, their laughter punctuating the gentle hum of the city beyond the park's green borders. Izuku, already a devout student of heroism, was cataloging the different types of bugs with the earnest gravity of a seasoned biologist. This one has 7 spots, Hikari. That means it's a Nanahoshi Tentu. It's a super lucky kind. Hikari, a small, quiet girl of 4 with eyes the same shade of emerald green as her brother's, giggled. Her hair, a darker, forest green, was tied into 2 clumsy pigtails that bounced as she clapped her hands. Lucky! She chirped, her voice as soft as the flower petals she gently touched. She reached out to a brilliant red tulip, its head held high and proud. Her tiny fingers, still chubby with baby fat, brushed against the waxy petal. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a strange and terrible thing occurred. The vibrant red of the tulip seemed to bleach away, not fading, but being actively siphoned out. It turned a sickly, pale pink, then a washed-out white, and finally, a brittle, papery gray. The stalk, once thick and resilient, drooped as if all its life had been pulled from it, and the entire flower crumbled into a fine, lifeless dust in the space of a heartbeat. Hikari snatched her hand back with a gasp, her wide eyes staring at the gray powder where a beautiful flower had been just seconds before. Izuku, it broke. Izuku, ever the analyst, knelt down, his brow furrowed. That's weird. It didn't break, it just disappeared. He looked at her hand, then back at the spot. It wasn't the work of a clumsy child. It was something else, something unnatural. Before he could ponder it further, their friend, Tsubasa, came running over, a plastic All Might figurine held high. Hey! My mom said we have to go soon. One last game? Okay. Izuku agreed, his attention immediately shifting. As Tsubasa turned to run, he stumbled over an exposed tree root. He yelped, pinwheeling his arms. Instinctively, Hikari reached out to steady him, her small hand closing firmly around his wrist to stop his fall. The effect was instantaneous and horrifying. Tsubasa's cheerful expression went slack. The color drained from his face, leaving his skin a clammy, pallid white. His eyes, wide with a sudden, nameless terror, rolled back into his head. A shudder racked his small body. Cold, he whispered, his voice a ghost of its former self. Then, his legs buckled, and he collapsed onto the soft grass, completely unconscious. Tsubasa's mother, who had been calling his name from a nearby bench, saw him fall. A cry of alarm tore from her throat as she sprinted over. Tsubasa! Oh my God, what happened? She knelt beside her son, her hands fluttering over him. Her frantic eyes landed on Hikari, who was still standing there, her hand outstretched, frozen in the position it had been in when she grabbed Tsubasa's wrist. Her face was a mask of pure, uncomprehending terror. What did you do? Tsubasa's mother shrieked, her voice sharp with accusation and fear. She scooped up her son, her body angled away from Hikari as if shielding him from a predator. Inko Midoriya rushed over, her own face pale with worry. What's wrong? Is he all right? Stay away. The other woman snapped, clutching her son tighter. Keep your daughter away from him. From all of us. There's something wrong with her. The words struck Hikari like a physical blow. A sob hitched in her throat, and she began to tremble, her small body shaking with a force that seemed too great for her frame. She looked at her own hands as if they were venomous snakes. Inko, caught between her maternal instinct to defend her child and the primal fear radiating from the other mother, hesitated for a split second too long. In that moment of hesitation, Hikari saw not a protector, but another person who was afraid of her. It broke something inside the little girl. A heart-wrenching wail escaped her lips, a sound of pure misery and self-loathing. But Izuku didn't hesitate. He had seen the flower. He had seen Tsubasa. He didn't understand what had happened, but he understood the look on his sister's face. It was the look of someone who believed they were a monster. Ignoring the panicked shouts and the fearful stares, he moved to stand in front of Hikari, a small, quirkless boy creating a human shield. He turned to face his sister, his own eyes wet with unshed tears. He saw her terror, her shaking hands, her belief that she was something to be feared. Gently, deliberately, he reached out and took her hand. Hikari flinched, trying to pull away. No! Don't! I'll hurt you! You won't, Izuku said, his voice trembling but firm. He tightened his grip. A faint, tingling coldness seeped into his skin where their hands met, a strange sensation like dipping his fingers into a winter stream. It was there, a definite pull, but it wasn't painful. It wasn't the violent drain that had felled Tsubasa. It was gentle, subdued. He looked her right in the eyes, his own emerald gaze unwavering. See? It's okay, Hikari. I'm not scared. The simple words, spoken with such conviction, were an anchor in her storm of fear. Her sobs quieted into hiccuping gasps. He squeezed her hand, a small, reassuring pressure. I don't know what that was, he admitted, his gaze flickering towards the spot where the tulip had turned to dust. But it's your quirk. It's a part of you, and it's not evil. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, a secret shared between just the two of them in the shadow of the world's fear. You're not a monster. You're my sister, and I'll protect you. Always. He paused, a familiar, determined fire igniting in his eyes, the same fire that appeared whenever he watched videos of All Might. And one day, he declared, his voice filled with a child's unwavering certainty, we'll show everyone. We'll show them you can be a hero with your power. We'll be heroes, together. That promise, forged in a moment of fear and sealed with a touch, became the bedrock of their world. It was a vow made in the shadow of a terrifying quirk, a promise that would shape their every waking moment for the next 10 years. 10 years later, the sun wasn't so benevolent. It was a harsh, glaring thing that beat down on the concrete and asphalt of Aldera Junior High. For Izuku Midoriya, now a lanky, freckle-faced teenager, the world had only gotten louder, and its shadows, deeper. Morning, Izuku! Hikari! Their mother, Inko, called from the kitchen. Her voice was warm, but a decade of vigilance had etched fine lines of worry around her eyes. She placed 2 plates of tamagoyaki on the table, her movements practiced and careful. She still loved her children fiercely, but a part of her remained coiled with a deep-seated caution. She hadn't forgotten the day Tsubasa's family had moved away, or the hushed, fearful phone calls from other parents. She would still, on occasion, pull her hand back a fraction of a second too soon when reaching for something at the same time as Hikari. It was a small, subconscious flinch, but Hikari noticed it every single time. Hikari, now 14, was a mirror of her mother's quiet demeanor. She kept her hands tucked into the pockets of her oversized hoodie, a habit she'd developed to prevent accidental contact. Her long, dark green hair was usually worn down, a curtain she could hide behind. She gave their mother a small, fleeting smile. Morning, Mom. Eat up, you too, Izuku said, already shoveling rice into his mouth. We'll be late. He was the sun in her muted world, the force of energy and optimism that pulled her forward. Their walk to their respective schools, his junior high was a block away from her own, was a practice drill in situational awareness. Izuku walked on the outside, a buffer between Hikari and the jostling morning crowds. He was acutely aware of every person who got too close, his body subtly shifting to intercept any potential collisions. The whispers followed them, as they always did. There they are. The Midoriya siblings. The quirkless Wonder and his sister, the one with the creepy quirk. Heard she can suck the life out of you. Reaper girl. Izuku's jaw tightened at that last one. He shot a sharp glare in the direction of the snickering students, who quickly looked away. He felt Hikari shrink beside him, pulling her hoodie tighter around herself. Don't listen to them, he muttered, his voice low and fierce. They're idiots. They don't know anything. It's okay, Nichan, she whispered, her eyes fixed on the pavement. I'm used to it. Well, you shouldn't be, he retorted, his frustration bubbling up. He hated it. He hated their ignorance, their fear, their casual cruelty. But most of all, he hated his own powerlessness to stop it. What could a quirkless boy do against a world determined to misunderstand? He could analyze. He could prepare. He dropped her off at her school gate, a ritual they performed every day. Have a good day, Hikari. Remember what Aizawa-sensei said in his last email, focus on control, not suppression. Try the battery exercise if you get a chance. She nodded, a flicker of gratitude in her eyes. I will. You too, Nichan. Don't let Bakugo-kun get to you. He forced a grin. Kaken? He's all bark. See you this afternoon? He watched until she disappeared inside the school building before turning towards his own personal battlefield. His smile vanished instantly. The bullying he faced for being quirkless was bad enough, but it had metastasized over the years. He wasn't just useless Deku. He was Deku, the monster's brother, a title that carried a special kind of venom. It implied he was contaminated by association, a guardian to something that should have been locked away. The classroom was a familiar cacophony. The teacher droned on about career paths, eventually landing on the topic of heroics. Ah yes, Midoriya. You're planning on applying to UA, aren't you? The teacher said, a smirk playing on his lips. The class erupted in laughter. UA? Midoriya? You can't get into the hero course just by studying. He's quirkless. They got rid of that rule. Izuku protested, his face flushing hot. I could be the first one. Then came the inevitable explosion. An impact on his desk sent him tumbling backward. Katsuki Bakugo stood over him, smoke curling from his palms, his red eyes burning with a mixture of rage and contempt. DKU. He snarled. You're worse than these damn rejects. You're quirkless. What, you think you're gonna go to UA and protect that freak sister of yours from there? She's more likely to be a villain than a hero, and you'll be her first victim. The class fell silent. Bakugo had crossed the line, and everyone knew it. Mentioning Hikari was taboo. Izuku, who usually cowered before Bakugo's wrath, slowly got to his feet. A flicker of something cold and hard sparked in his green eyes. Don't you ever talk about her, Kaken, he said, his voice dangerously low. Bakugo was taken aback for a second by the uncharacteristic defiance, before his rage surged back tenfold. What did you say to me, you damn nerd? Before he could lunge, the teacher intervened, his voice bored. All right, that's enough, Bakugo. Settle down. The rest of the day passed in a haze of tension. As the final bell rang, Izuku packed his bag, his hands moving with hurried purpose. He just wanted to get his notebook and go home. Of course, Bakugo and his cronies had other ideas. We're not done, Deku, Bakugo said, snatching the notebook from Izuku's hands. Its cover was already worn, the title Hero Analysis for the Future, number 13 written in Izuku's neat, compact handwriting. What's that? His diary? One of the lackeys snickered. Bakugo flipped through the pages, his expression twisting into a sneer. The hell is this? Pages and pages of creepy stalking. You're pathetic. He paused, his eyes narrowing on a detailed schematic. What's this garbage? Aura-regulating gloves? Energy conversion pack? He let out a harsh laugh. Still trying to fix her, Deku? You can't polish a curse. With a sudden, violent motion, Bakugo slammed his palms together on the notebook. A sharp explosion rocked the air, and the book was sent sailing out the open window, its pages scorched and smoking. Izuku could only watch, his heart plummeting with it. You want to be a hero so bad? Bakugo said, his voice dripping with malice as he placed a smoking hand on Izuku's shoulder. I've got a time-saving idea for you. If you're praying for a quirk in your next life, take a swan dive off the roof of the building. And hope you're not born a freak's brother next time either. Bakugo and his friends sauntered out, laughing. For a long time, Izuku just stood there, shaking. The swan dive comment stung, but the jab about his sister, the casual desecration of the plans he'd made to help her, that felt like a blade twisting in his gut. He eventually made his way outside, his feet dragging. He found the notebook floating in the school's koi pond, the fish nibbling at the burnt, pulpy edges. He fished it out, water and ink dripping down his arms. It was ruined. He clutched the soggy mess to his chest, a wave of despair washing over him. Kaken was right. What was he doing? He was a quirkless boy trying to take on the world for two people. It was impossible. His dream wasn't just his own, it was a shared lifeline for him and Hikari. If he failed her too. He started the long walk home, taking a detour under a dark, grimy underpass. He squeezed the water from the notebook, flipping through the smeared pages. He had poured hundreds of hours into this, detailed analyses of heroes like Eraserhead and Gang Orca, who had succeeded despite having quirks that society deemed villainous or unheroic. He'd studied their support gear, their fighting styles, their media presence. Then there were the other sections, the ones Bakugo had mocked. They were his most secret, most hopeful designs. The aura-regulating gloves were lined with biofeedback sensors and a microfilament mesh designed to give Hikari tactile information about her own energy output, helping her learn to modulate it. The energy conversion pack was a theoretical device that would clip to her belt, designed to channel the life force she drained into a specialized battery, preventing the debilitating backlash that came from absorbing too much energy too quickly. It was his way of fighting back, of turning her curse into a tool. Seeing the designs warped and bleeding ink felt like a physical representation of his own failing hope. Maybe it really is impossible, he thought, tears welling in his eyes. It was at that precise moment of despair that the shadow behind him shifted. A foul, cloying stench filled the air, a medium-sized invisibility cloak. A gurgling voice slithered from the sewer grate. Izuku turned, his blood running cold. A monstrous creature made of green, viscous sludge surged up from the manhole, its two massive, yellow eyes fixing on him with predatory glee. "You'll do," the sludge villain rasped, lunging forward. Slime filled Izuku's mouth and nose before he could even scream. It was suffocating, a thick, cloying fluid forcing its way down his throat. His struggles were useless, his limbs absorbed into the villain's gelatinous body. He was dying. His vision began to tunnel, black spots dancing at the edges. This is it? This is how it ends? Panic gave way to a singular, terrifying thought, clearer and more horrifying than his own impending death. Hikari. If I'm gone, who will protect her? Who will stand between her and the whispers? Who will tell her she's not a monster? She'll be all alone. The thought was a jolt of pure adrenaline, a desperate, primal need to survive not for himself, but for her. He clawed uselessly at the sludge, his fingers finding no purchase. His lungs burned. The blackness was closing in. No. I made a promise. Suddenly, a thunderous voice shattered the nightmare. Have no fear, for I am here. The sewer grate blasted off its moorings as a colossal figure shot out. It was him. The symbol of peace. All Might. Texas smash. A hurricane of wind pressure tore through the underpass. The sludge villain was atomized, blown apart into 1,000 splattering droplets. Izuku fell to the ground, gasping, coughing, filling his starving lungs with sweet, precious air. He looked up, his vision blurry, and saw the towering, muscular form of his idol, his smile as bright and reassuring as the sun. All Might was quickly gathering the splattered villain into a soda bottle, his movements efficient and powerful. He gave Izuku's shoulder a few firm pats, waking him from his stupor. All good, my boy. Apologies for getting you caught up in my villain hunting. All Might boomed, signing Izuku's ruined notebook without being asked. Well, I must be off. A hero's work is never done. Wait. Izuku croaked, his voice raw. He latched onto All Might's leg just as the hero prepared to leap, an act of sheer desperation. The flight was terrifying, the wind whipping at his face. They landed hard on a nearby rooftop. All Might was not happy, scolding him for his recklessness. But Izuku had to know. He had to ask. It was a question that held the weight of 2 lives. Even if I don't have a quirk, he began, his voice shaking, can I become a hero? Can someone without a quirk be like you? The silence that followed was heavy. All Might's muscular form seemed to deflate, smoke pouring off him as he reverted to a skeletal, almost schoolish man. He explained his injury, the ticking clock he was on, the truth behind the invincible smile. And then, he gave his answer. No, All Might said, his voice soft but firm. I cannot simply say, you can be a hero even without a power. It's not a bad thing to dream, young man. But you have to be realistic. He gestured towards the door. Pro-heroes are always risking their lives. Some villains just can't be beaten without a power. So no. I don't think you can be a hero without a quirk. Each word was a hammer blow, shattering the last fragile remnants of Izuku's dream. He stood there, numb, as All Might left. The promise he'd made to Hikari echoed in his mind, now sounding like a foolish child's fantasy. I'll protect you. We'll be heroes together. How could he? He was just a quirkless, useless Deku. He walked down the stairs and through the streets in a daze. He was on autopilot, his mind a wasteland of broken hopes. Then he heard it, an explosion, just a few blocks away. Crowds were gathering. His feet, guided by years of habit, carried him toward the scene, and he saw it. It was the same sludge villain. It had escaped. And it had another hostage. The victim was thrashing, setting off explosions that hampered the hero's efforts to get close. It was Bakugo. Izuku froze. The heroes weren't doing anything. Death Arms was holding the line, Kamui Woods was trying to evacuate civilians, Backdraft was fighting the fires. No one had the right quirk to handle the villain. They were waiting for someone else. He saw the fear in Bakugo's eyes, the same desperate, suffocating terror Izuku had felt just minutes before. He heard All Might's words echoing in his head, "You have to be realistic. I don't think you can be a hero without a quirk." His feet felt rooted to the spot. His mind screamed at him to stay put. He was powerless. There was nothing he could do. And then, a new thought, sharp and cold as ice water, cut through the noise. It wasn't about Bakugo. It wasn't about the heroes. It wasn't even about himself. What if that was Hikari? The hypothetical struck him with the force of a physical blow. He pictured her in the villain's grasp. He saw her terror, her small frame struggling. He imagined her fear reaching a breaking point, her quirk lashing out uncontrollably, a desperate, instinctual defense. She wouldn't be able to control it. She might drain the villain, but what about the people nearby? The civilians? The heroes? What if she hurt someone? What if she killed someone? The world, which already saw her as a monster, would never let her forget it. They would crucify her, and it would be his fault. Because he stood by and did nothing. The promise he made 10 years ago wasn't just words. It was a fire in his soul. I'll protect you. In that split second, his body moved before his brain could catch up. He burst through the crowd, a green blur of motion. The heroes yelled at him. "Hey! Stop! Kid, you'll get yourself killed!" He didn't hear them. The world slowed down. His analytical mind, honed by a decade of observation, took over. He saw the villain's churning body, the way it tried to protect its eyes. Its eyes are its weak point. He remembered the page in his notebook. He remembered every fight he'd ever studied. He ripped his backpack off his shoulders and hurled it with all his might. It sailed through the air, a perfect arc, and smacked the villain square in the eye. The monster roared in pain, its grip loosening for a fraction of a second. It was all the time Izuku needed. He was already there, his hands clawing at the sludge, trying to free Bakugo's face. "Kaken!" he screamed. "What the hell are you doing here?" Bakugo choked out. "I don't know." Izuku cried, tears streaming down his face, his voice cracking with desperation and terror. "My legs, they just started moving. I couldn't stand there and watch you die." He saw Bakugo's face, and for a fleeting moment he saw his sister's. He saw every person he'd ever sworn to protect. He wasn't thinking about being a hero anymore. He was just trying to save someone. The villain recovered, raising a slimy tendril to smash Izuku into the pavement. This was it. He was going to die. But he had tried. He hadn't stood by. A massive hand grabbed his collar, yanking him back. A familiar, booming voice filled the air, louder and more powerful than ever before. "I really am pathetic," said All Might, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. "Even though I admonished you, I wasn't putting what I said into practice." He planted his feet, his fist cocked back. "A hero can always find a way to break out of a tough spot." Detroit. Smash! The punch was cataclysmic. The sheer air pressure carved a path through the sludge, blowing the villain to pieces and changing the weather itself. Dark clouds formed overhead, and it began to rain. In the aftermath, Izuku was scolded relentlessly by the pro-heroes. Bakugo was praised for his bravery. The injustice of it was a bitter pill, but Izuku was too numb to care. He just turned and began the walk home, the weight of the day settling on him like a shroud. He had failed on every conceivable level. DKU, he turned. It was Bakugo, running to catch up. For a moment, Izuku thought he was in for another round of abuse. I never asked you for help. Bakugo yelled, his pride warring with something else Izuku couldn't name. And you didn't help me. Got it? I was fine by myself. You're a quirkless failure who wouldn't even be able to save his own freak sister, so don't you ever think you can look down on me. Don't you forget it. With that, Bakugo spun around and stormed off. It was a strange, twisted version of a thank you, but Izuku understood. He was about to continue on his way when a familiar voice called out to him again, this time from the other direction. I am here. All Might, in his full glory, skidded to a stop in front of him. Young man! I have come to thank you, and to discuss your question from earlier. He boomed. He quickly deflated back into his skeletal form, coughing up a spray of blood. If I hadn't heard your story, I'd have been a worthless bystander, laughing from the sidelines. So, thank you? No, Izuku mumbled, shaking his head. It was my fault he got away. I wasted your time and got in your way. I'm just a quirkless boy who can't do anything right. That's not true. All Might countered, his voice sharp. Of all the people at the scene, the pros, the civilians, it was only you who acted. The quirkless, timid boy. You, and you alone, spurred me into action. All Might looked at him, his sunken eyes piercing. Top heroes all have stories from their early days. Most of their stories have one thing in common. Their bodies moved before they had a chance to think. Izuku looked up, his own tear-filled eyes wide with shock. He remembered the feeling perfectly. His legs moving on their own. That's what happened to you back there, yes? Izuku could only nod, a sob catching in his throat. All Might smiled, a true, genuine smile that had nothing to do with his hero persona. Young man, he said, his voice filled with a profound gravity. You, too, can become a hero. The words Izuku had longed to hear his entire life washed over him, and he collapsed to his knees, weeping. It was a dream he had all but abandoned just minutes before, now resurrected by the one person whose opinion mattered most. But as the initial shock subsided, All Might held up a hand. But I want to know something first. You said on the roof that you couldn't be a hero without a quirk. But back there, you ran in anyway. Your fear was palpable. But something else was driving you. Something stronger than fear. What was it? Izuku wiped his eyes, his breathing still shaky. He looked at his hands, then at the city skyline. He thought of a little girl in a park, her face a mask of terror. He thought of the whispers and the names. He thought of the promise he had made in the shadow of that awful day. My sister, he began, his voice barely a whisper. She has a dangerous quirk. One that scares people. It scares her. All her life, people have called her a monster, a villain in the making. He clenched his fists, the memory of Bakugo's words fueling a fresh wave of protective anger. They're wrong. She's the kindest person I know. She's just afraid. I promised her a long time ago that I would protect her. And that one day, we would show the world that any quirk can be used for good. That she could be a hero. He looked up at All Might, his green eyes burning with a fierce, unwavering light. When I saw that villain, when I saw Kaken trapped, all I could think was, what if that was her? What if she was in there, so scared that her quirk went wild? I couldn't let that happen. I have to be strong enough to protect her, strong enough to be her shield, so she can have the chance to be who she's meant to be. I don't just want to be a hero to save people, All Might. I have to be a hero, for both of us. All Might stood in silence, his gaunt face unreadable. He looked at the crying boy before him, a boy with no power, no physical prowess, but with a heart forged in the fires of fierce, selfless devotion. He saw a heroism that went beyond fighting villains. It was a heroism of protection, of nurturing, of believing in someone else so completely that you would throw your own life away for their future. It was the heart of a true hero. The heart of a worthy successor. A shield for her sword, All Might murmured, a slow, wide smile spreading across his face. I see now. Young man, I have been searching for someone to inherit my power. He stood tall, his arms spread wide. My quirk is not just a power, it is a sacred torch passed from one generation to the next. And I deem you worthy of inheriting it. Izuku stared, his mind unable to process the words. Inherit your quirk? That's right, All Might declared, his voice ringing with destiny. This is the story of how you, Izuku Midoriya, became a hero. And it starts right now. The world had narrowed to the space between two people on a darkening street. The distant sounds of sirens faded into a dull hum, and the lingering smell of ozone and rain felt like artifacts from another reality. Izuku Midoriya was on his knees, his entire being vibrating with the aftershock of a single, impossible sentence. You, too, can become a hero. It was the absolution he had craved his entire life, the validation he thought he would never receive. But what followed was a concept so alien, so fundamentally contrary to everything he knew about the world, that his tear-soaked brain struggled to even form a coherent thought. Inherit your quirk? Izuku echoed, his voice a ragged whisper. He stared up at the skeletal form of All Might, searching his face for any sign of a joke, a misunderstanding, anything that made more sense than the words he just heard. But that's impossible. A person's quirk is a part of their biology, it's genetic. It can't be passed on. It's not like a baton in a relay race. A weary, knowing smile touched All Might's thin lips. That's where you're both right and wrong, my boy. The world knows quirks as you describe them. But mine is different. He leaned forward, his voice dropping, taking on the tone of someone sharing a truth that could shatter the foundations of society. The media, in their typical fashion, have always mislabeled my power. They call it super strength or boost. A simple, punchy name for a phenomenon they can't comprehend. The truth is, my quirk is called One for All. The name hung in the air, resonating with a strange power. One for All Might continued, his sunken eyes glowing with an inner fire. It is a sacred torch, a crystallization of power passed from one person to the next. Its first core ability is to stockpile power. Each person who wields it cultivates that power and then passes it on, making it stronger with each new generation. It is a cauldron of raw, untamed energy, brimming with the strength of all those who came before. He coughed, a racking sound, and wiped a fleck of blood from his chin. Its second, more secret ability is what makes it all possible, the ability to be transferred. Izuku's mind, the same mind that meticulously catalogued hero stats and quirk applications, was spinning. It was a paradigm shift of seismic proportions. Transferred how? By choice. By the wielder gifting it to another, All Might explained. This is why the villains, the monsters like All for One who stole my stomach, could never take it from me. It cannot be stolen, it can only be given. For generations, this power has been used to fight evil, a secret weapon moving through the shadows of history. And I am the eighth wielder. Eighth. The number was so small, so intimate. It implied a lineage, a secret family bound by duty. Izuku felt like he was staring into a chasm of history he never knew existed. And now, All Might said, his gaze locking onto Izuku's with an intensity that pinned him in place. I am looking for the ninth. Izuku's breath hitched. But why me? I'm nothing. I'm quirkless. There are countless others with strong quirks, with heroic track records, and not a single one of them had the heart you showed today, All Might interjected, his voice firm. Power can be trained. Strength can be built. But a true heroic spirit? That is innate. I told you, your body moved before you could think. But I was watching your face, young man. In that moment, when you ran toward death itself, it wasn't a thirst for glory I saw. It wasn't arrogance, or a desire to show off. It was pure, unfiltered, selfless instinct. He took a step closer, his towering shadow falling over Izuku. And when you told me why, that changed everything. Most people want to be heroes to save the masses, to be famous, to fight evil, all noble goals. But your heroism is forged from a singular, powerful source. You want to be a shield, You want to build a world where someone you love, someone the world has rejected, can stand in the light. You aren't just trying to tear down evil, you are trying to build up good. That is a different, and in my opinion, a more profound, form of heroism. He knelt, bringing himself down to Izuku's level. I am offering you the chance to make your promise a reality. To gain the power to be that shield. But it will not be easy. This is not a gift, it is a burden. You will have to work harder than you can possibly imagine to make your body a worthy vessel. You will face challenges that will break you. But if you succeed, you will have the strength to protect your sister, and everyone else. He held out a bony hand. So, I ask you again, Izuku Midoriya. Do you accept this power? Will you carry this torch? Izuku looked at All Might's outstretched hand. He thought of Hikari's face, a decade younger, crumpled in terror in the park. He thought of her hands, always hidden in her pockets. He thought of her quiet, heartbreaking acceptance of the world's cruelty. He thought of his promise, a promise that had felt more and more like a hollow lie with each passing year. And now, here it was. A path forward. A miracle wrapped in sacrifice. Tears streamed down his face anew, but these were not tears of despair. They were tears of overwhelming, terrifying hope. He reached out with a trembling hand and grasped All Might's. I accept, he choked out, the words feeling impossibly large in his mouth. I'll do it. I will not fail you. The walk home was a surreal journey through a world that looked the same but felt fundamentally different. The streetlights cast their familiar orange glow, cars hummed past, but Izuku felt like he was walking on the surface of the moon. He was clutching a secret that could rewrite his entire existence. One for all. He kept repeating the words in his head, a mantra of disbelief and reverence. He was no longer just Deku, the quirkless failure. He was Izuku Midoriya, the chosen successor to the symbol of peace. His hand went instinctively to the pocket of his charred uniform, where the waterlogged hero analysis notebook rested. He thought of the scorched pages, the smeared ink of his designs for Hikari's support gear. Bakugo had tried to destroy his dream. All Might had just handed him the tools to build it into an empire. The weight of it all hit him when he reached the door to his apartment. This secret wasn't just his. From the moment he told All Might about Hikari, she had become a part of this story. He couldn't keep this from her. Their promise was a shared one. This new, impossible path had to be as well. The idea of telling her filled him with a nervous energy that vibrated under his skin. He opened the door. I'm home. Inko rushed to the entrance, her face a mess of relief and worry. Izuku. Oh, thank goodness. I saw the news, the villain attack. It was near your school. I was so worried. She hugged him tightly, then pulled back, her eyes scanning him for injuries. I'm fine, Mom, really, he said, forcing a reassuring smile. It was a few blocks away. I wasn't involved. The lie felt heavy and wrong, the first of many he would have to tell. Hikari appeared behind their mother, her emerald eyes wide with concern. She didn't say anything, but her gaze was fixed on him, analytical and searching. She could always read him better than anyone. She knew something was different. The air around him was charged with an emotion she couldn't name. After a tense dinner where Izuku barely touched his food and deflected his mother's worried questions, he retreated to the sanctuary of his bedroom. It was less a room and more of an All Might shrine, but tonight, the posters and figurines seemed to be watching him with a new, knowing intensity. A few minutes later, there was a soft knock on the door. It opened a crack, and Hikari peeked in. Ni-chan? Are you really okay? Yeah, I'm fine, he said a little too quickly. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. She stood there, her hands twisting the hem of her sleeve. You're lying, she said softly. Something happened today. Something big. After Bakugo-kun. Her voice faltered on his name. She knew what he was capable of. Izuku sighed. He couldn't lie to her. He gestured for her to sit on his bed. She did, perching on the edge, her posture tense and watchful. You're right, he began, his heart thumping against his ribs. Something incredible happened. He took a deep breath and began to explain. He told her everything. The sludge villain, his own capture and rescue, his reckless question on the rooftop, All Might's true form, and his initial dream-crushing rejection. He watched her face as he spoke, saw her flinch at his near-death experience, saw her eyes fill with a familiar sadness when he recounted All Might's words about realism. Then, he told her about the second attack. About seeing Bakugo trapped. He told her about the thought that had spurred him into action. All I could see was you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I couldn't just stand there. Hikari's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes shining with tears. A mixture of terror for him and a deep, aching guilt washed over her. So you ran in, for me? I ran in because it was the right thing to do, he corrected gently. But you were my reason. You always are. He paused, gathering his courage for the final, unbelievable part of the story. And, All Might saw it. He saw everything. And he chose me. He explained the concept of one for all, the sacred torch, the stockpiling of power. He watched her eyes widen in disbelief, her mind trying to grapple with the impossibility of it all. When he finished, the room was silent save for the quiet hum of the city outside. Hikari just stared at him, her expression a complex tapestry of awe, fear, and profound concern. So, he's going to give you his quirk? She whispered, as if saying it too loud might break the spell. He's going to give me a chance to earn it, Izuku clarified. I have to train. I have 10 months until the UA entrance exam. I have to turn my body into a vessel strong enough to handle that much power. If I don't, it could tear me apart. Her face paled. The fear, her constant companion, immediately latched onto that last sentence. Tear you apart? Nichan, no. It's too dangerous. What if you get hurt? What if it kills you? Her voice trembled. This miracle sounded like a potential tragedy to her. You don't have to do this. Especially not for me. I'm not worth that kind of risk. Hikari, stop, Izuku said, his voice firm but gentle. He reached out and, for the first time in a long time without her flinching, took her hand. It was cool to the touch, as always. This isn't just for you, it's for us. Remember our promise? This is it. This is our chance. This is the how. All my life, I've been useless. A quirkless kid who could only write in notebooks. But now I can actually do something. I can build the strength to keep that promise. He squeezed her hand. But I can't do it alone. I need you. I need you to be my partner in this, just like we always planned. This secret, it's ours now. The training, the planning, everything. One for all isn't just for me. In a way, it's for two of us. Her tears finally spilled over, but a small, watery smile touched her lips. The guilt was still there, a heavy stone in her stomach, but it was now overshadowed by a fragile, burgeoning hope. He wasn't doing this for her. He was doing this with her. They were a team. Okay, she whispered, her grip tightening on his hand. Okay, Nichan. For two of us. The next 10 months were a descent into a special kind of hell, illuminated by the blinding light of a singular goal. The American Dream Plan, as All Might cheerfully called it, was a brutal, relentless regimen designed to forge Izuku's frail body into a steel container. The sun had barely risen on the first day when Izuku met All Might at the Dagoba Municipal Beach Park, a stretch of coastline that had become an illegal dumping ground. Mountains of rusted appliances, broken furniture, and discarded electronics choked the sand and surf. This is my gym? Izuku asked, aghast. That's right, my boy. All Might boomed, gesturing to the landscape of trash. The UA entrance exam is in 10 months. Your task is to completely clean this entire coastline. It is a monumental feat of physical labor that will build every muscle in your body, and as a bonus, you'll be performing a great community service. 2 birds with 1 stone. The first 3 months were pure, unrelenting agony. Izuku would wake up before dawn, follow the diet plan taped to his wall, and head to the beach. He'd spend hours dragging refrigerators, hauling tires, and coiling rusted cables. He'd come home every night with his muscles screaming, his hands raw and blistered, and collapse into bed, only to wake up and do it all over again. Hikari became his silent, steadfast shadow. She couldn't help with the heavy lifting, but she became his one-person support crew. She'd be there on the sidelines, sitting on a cleaner patch of sand with a first aid kit and a cooler of water. She learned how to wrap sprained wrists and treat deep scrapes. She would have nutrient-rich smoothies ready for him when he stumbled out of the shower. She watched him push his body to the point of collapse and beyond, her heart a constant, tight knot of worry. But she also saw the change. The wiry, soft frame began to harden. Defined muscles started to appear on his arms and back. His posture straightened. The physical transformation was undeniable, but a mental one was happening in parallel. The old despair was being burned away by sheer effort, replaced by a grim, unyielding determination. Around the 4th month, their dynamic began to shift. It was no longer just Izuku's training. One sweltering afternoon, he was trying to move a massive, waterlogged wardrobe. He strained, his muscles bulging, but it wouldn't budge. He collapsed onto the sand, gasping for air. Hikari rushed over with a cold water bottle. "It's no good," Izuku panted, frustration clear in his voice. "I'm following the plan, but I feel like I'm hitting a wall." Hikari looked from her exhausted brother to the mountain of trash. Then she looked at her own hands. Maybe we're only focusing on half the problem," she said quietly. Izuku looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" "Your body is the vessel," she said, thinking back to his explanation of OFA. "But our goal isn't just for you to be strong. It's for us to be a hero duo. My quirk. I've spent my whole life trying not to use it. Suppressing it. But Aizawa-sensei's email, he said control, not suppression." She took a shaky breath. "If you're training to become a vessel for power, then I should be training to control the power I already have." Izuku's eyes widened. She was right. He had been so focused on his own monumental task that he'd neglected the other half of their equation. His analytical brain, now fueled by a new sense of purpose, kicked into high gear. "You're right," he said, sitting up straighter. "We've been treating your quirk like a liability to be managed. We need to start treating it like the asset it is. We need data." That evening, his hero analysis for the future notebook, now carefully dried and preserved, was open on his desk. But he was drawing in a new section titled Synergy Project, Aura. Their dual training began the next day. It started small, with inanimate objects. Izuku brought a box of D-cell batteries to the beach. "Okay," he instructed, his voice taking on a coaching tone. "The goal isn't just to drain it. The goal is to feel it. Hold the battery. Close your eyes. Try to touch just the energy inside it. Don't take it all at once. Just sip it." Hikari held the battery, her hand trembling. For years, any activation of her quirk had been accidental, born of panic. To do it on purpose felt like willingly touching a hot stove. She focused, channeling the memory of how it felt to touch her brother's hand, that gentle, controlled pull. A faint, cold tingle spread through her palm. She could feel a subtle current, a low hum of stored chemical energy. She focused on drawing just a tiny thread of it into herself. It felt cold and metallic, completely different from the warm, vibrant feel of the life force from the flower all those years ago. She held it for 10 seconds, then let go, her heart pounding. Izuku immediately picked up the battery and tested it with a small multimeter. A 7% drop in charge, he announced, a grin spreading across his face. "Hikari, that's incredible." It was precise. For the first time, a successful use of her quirk was met not with fear or revulsion, but with data and encouragement. A tiny seed of confidence began to sprout in the barren ground of her self-esteem. They practiced every day. She learned to drain batteries to specific percentages. She learned to pull the energy slowly to minimize the backlash, which still left her feeling dizzy and nauseous if she wasn't careful. Izuku recorded everything: duration of contact, perceived energy flow, level of backlash, recovery time. After a month, they moved on to organic, non-sentient targets. Izuku brought potted plants to the beach. "This will be different," he warned. "It's life force. It'll feel warmer. Be careful." She touched the leaf of a small succulent. The energy was completely different from the battery. It was a slow, gentle pulse, a quiet, living warmth. She tried to just skim the surface, to take only the excess energy without harming the plant itself. The succulent's vibrant green faded almost imperceptibly, but it didn't wither. When she pulled her hand away, she felt a slight wave of dizziness, but it was manageable. They discovered the backlash was tied to the type of energy she drained. The artificial energy of the batteries felt foreign and made her feel sick. The life force from the plants, while more potent, integrated more easily, causing exhaustion but less nausea. It was a major breakthrough. As the 7th month bled into the 8th, the beach was transforming. Vast swathes of sand were now visible. Izuku was almost unrecognizable. He was solid, packed with lean, powerful muscle earned through sweat and grit. He moved with a newfound confidence, easily hauling objects that would have been impossible for him just months before. Their synergy had deepened. They developed a nonverbal shorthand. A slight nod from him was all she needed to know it was time for her control exercises. A pale tint to her cheeks was his cue to call a halt and hand her a juice box. They weren't just protector and protected anymore. They were partners, training in tandem, two halves of a single, functioning unit. One evening, as Izuku was trying to dislodge a half-buried, rusted-out car engine, he slipped on a patch of wet sand and fell hard, his head narrowly missing a jagged piece of metal. He lay there, utterly spent, the engine still mockingly embedded in the ground. "I can't do it," he gasped, defeat creeping into his voice. Hikari walked over, her expression determined. "Let me try something." "Hikari, no," he said immediately. "Draining something that big, the backlash would be huge. It could put you in the hospital." "I'm not going to drain it," she said, her voice steady. She knelt beside him, placing one hand on the cold, rusted engine. She closed her eyes, feeling its dead, metallic inertia. Then, she placed her other hand on Izuku's forehead. He flinched, but she was impossibly gentle. "Just relax, Nichan. Don't fight it." Instead of pulling energy from him, she did the opposite. She used her quirk as a conduit. She drained the chilling cold from the massive engine block and, with intense concentration, siphoned it into her other hand, pressing the cool, soothing energy against his feverish skin. It was like a perfect, custom-made ice pack. The throbbing in his head subsided. Izuku stared at her, utterly stunned. You used it to help." She pulled back, looking a little drained from the concentration, but a proud smile graced her lips. "Control, not suppression," she repeated softly. It was a turning point. Her quirk wasn't just a weapon. It wasn't just a drain. It was a tool with applications they were only just beginning to understand. Izuku grabbed his notebook, his exhaustion forgotten, and began scribbling frantically about potential bidirectional energy flow. The final month was a frantic blur. The last patch of trash seemed to mock them, a final boss in their 10-month-long battle. Izuku worked with a feverish intensity, his body a well-oiled machine. Hikari was right there with him, her control now fine enough that she could wilt a single weed in a patch of grass without harming anything around it. Finally, on the morning of the UA exam, it was done. They stood on the seawall, the rising sun glinting off a pristine, beautiful coastline. The sand was clean, the water was clear. It was a testament to 10 months of impossible effort. "Oh my goodness!" A familiar voice boomed from above. All Might landed on the seawall in his muscle form, his jaw practically on the floor as he surveyed the transformed beach. He looked at Izuku, who was now lean and powerfully built, his frame taut with conditioned muscle. "You did it, young man!" All Might roared, a proud, booming laugh echoing across the water. "You exceeded my every expectation. You're a fine vessel." Izuku, his eyes welling with tears of exhaustion and pride, let out a triumphant scream, raising his fists to the sky. "I did it!" Hikari stood beside him, a radiant, happy smile on her face. "We did it," she thought. "And now," All Might said, reverting to his skeletal form with a poof of smoke, "for your reward." He plucked a single hair from his head. "My DNA." Izuku and Hikari both stared, completely bewildered. "To inherit my power," All Might explained with a completely straight face, "you have to swallow some of my genetic material." He held the hair out to Izuku. "Eat this." The sheer, unadulterated absurdity of the moment broke the tension. Izuku stared at the single strand of blonde hair as if it were an alien artifact. "But all my hard work was for this," he stammered. "This feels incredibly anticlimactic. It's just a formality. Now hurry!" You'll be late for the exam, All Might insisted. With a look of profound resignation, and with his sister watching with a mixture of horror and amusement, Izuku took the hair and swallowed it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a strange warmth bloomed in his stomach. It wasn't a fire, it was a sun. A feeling of immense, limitless power surged through his veins, a roaring ocean of energy that made every cell in his body hum. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. One for All was now a part of him. He felt its power, a sleeping giant within him, ready to be woken. It was too much, far too much for his newly forged body to handle without breaking. But it was there. It was real. As All Might gave him some last-minute, panicked advice about clenching his butt cheeks and yelling smash, Izuku turned to Hikari. Their eyes met. The promise made by a 6-year-old boy in a sun-drenched park had survived a decade of whispers, scorn, and despair. It had been tested in the fires of a villain attack and reforged through 10 months of grueling, shared sacrifice. He now had the power. She now had the control. The path was no longer a dream. It was a tangible road stretching out before them, leading directly to the gleaming gates of UA High. "I'll see you this afternoon," he said, his voice steady and filled with a confidence he'd never known before. "Do your best, Nichan," she replied, her own voice free of its usual tremble. "Show them what a hero looks like." He nodded, turned, and ran. He ran toward his exam, toward his future, toward the first real step on their shared journey to becoming the Synergy heroes. The promise was alive, and it was time to start keeping it. The morning of the UA entrance exam dawned gray and quiet, a stark contrast to the supernova of nervous energy imploding in the Midoriya household. The air was thick with unspoken hopes and fears, so dense Izuku felt he could barely draw a full breath. Inko Midoriya, a portrait of maternal anxiety, had been up since 4 a.m. The smell of katsudon, the traditional meal for victory, filled their small apartment. It was a gesture of profound faith, and it made Izuku's stomach churn with a pressure that had nothing to do with hunger. He stood in the hallway, already dressed in his tracksuit, while Hikari performed their new pre-departure ritual. She stood before him, her eyes closed in concentration, one hand held out a few inches from his chest. She wasn't touching him, but he could feel her presence, a faint, cool sensation on his skin, like the ghost of a winter breeze. It was her quirk, in its most delicate, perceptive form. "It's loud today," she whispered, her brow furrowed. "The star inside you. It's not sleeping. It's buzzing." That was her name for it. The star. One for all. To him, it felt like a barely contained sun, a roaring furnace of power that threatened to melt him from the inside out. He had swallowed All Might's hair that morning, a bizarre and humbling experience, and the power had settled within him, a terrifying, exhilarating weight. He hadn't tried to use it yet. The mere thought of tapping into that ocean of energy sent a jolt of panic through him. "Just try to keep it buzzing," he said, his voice tight. "Don't let it explode." "I won't," she promised, her eyes opening to meet his. Her own gaze was a mixture of fierce belief and heart-wrenching worry. She had been his shadow for 10 months, his nurse, his strategist, his quiet conscience. The dark circles under her eyes were a testament to her shared sacrifice. "Remember the plan. You don't need to hit 100%, you don't even need 50%. Just aim for a spark. A single spark is more than enough. And whatever you do, Nichan, come back in one piece." The unspoken part of her plea hung between them. "Your body is the only vessel we have. If you break it, we have nothing." "I will," he promised, the words feeling fragile. He gave her a nod, a silent acknowledgement of their shared burden, and walked out the door, the scent of victory katsudon clinging to him like a prayer. The walk to UA was a journey to a holy site. When the school finally came into view, its immense, gleaming glass towers reaching for the heavens like the arms of a modern god, Izuku's breath caught in his throat. The iconic U formed a gate that seemed less like an entrance and more like a portal to another dimension, a world where dreams were forged into reality. He was so lost in awe that he didn't see the crack in the pavement. His foot caught, and for one humiliating moment, the future symbol of peace was plummeting face first toward the ground. He braced for impact, a flush of shame heating his cheeks. but the impact never came. He just stopped, floating an inch from the concrete. "Whoa, are you okay?" a bright, cheerful voice asked. "It'd be a bad omen to trip before you even got inside, right?" He scrambled upright to see a girl with a round, friendly face and a permanent rosy blush on her cheeks. She pressed the tips of her fingers together. "Release," she said, and he dropped the final inch to the ground with a soft thud. "My quirk. Sorry for using it without asking. I was just, well, I figured you wouldn't mind. I'm super nervous, aren't you?" Yes," Izuku stammered, his brain short-circuiting. He had just been saved by a girl. A very nice girl. It was a novel and terrifying experience. He wanted to thank her, to say something cool, but his mouth could only produce a series of strangled squeaks. She just gave him a wave and a bubbly "Good luck!" Before hurrying inside, he took a deep breath, trying to steady his pounding heart. "Okay. Focus, Izuku. You're not just quirkless Deku anymore. You have a purpose. You have a power." The written portion of the exam was a welcome reprieve. Seated in a vast auditorium filled with hundreds of other hopefuls, Izuku felt the familiar comfort of academia. The questions were challenging, covering everything from advanced mathematics and literature to ethics and hero law, but this was his territory. His analytical mind, honed by years of obsessive study, tore through the test paper. For a brief, blissful hour, he felt competent. He felt like he belonged. That confidence evaporated the moment he stepped into the briefing hall for the practical exam. The lights dimmed, and the pro-hero present mic exploded onto the stage. "Welcome to today's live performance, everybody. Can I get a hey?" The silence in the auditorium was absolute. Izuku, despite his anxiety, couldn't help but smile. He was in the same room as present Mike. It was surreal. He listened intently as the hero explained the rules. A 10-minute mock battle in a massive, simulated urban environment. 3 types of faux villains, robots, worth 1, 2, or 3 points respectively. The goal was to use your quirk to immobilize them and rack up as many points as possible. A cold knot of dread formed in Izuku's stomach. Use your quirk. He didn't know how to use his quirk. It wasn't a tap, it was a nuke. How was he supposed to use a nuke to take out a 1-point robot without leveling the entire city block and turning his own arm into dust? His muttering started, a low, frantic hum under his breath. "Okay, so if the 1-pointer is the weakest, maybe it's like a small car. A full power smash would be overkill. I need a percentage, but what percentage?" All Might never said. "Does 1% feel like a tap? Or a punch? If I use it in my legs for speed, how do I stop? I haven't practiced stopping. What if I just run straight into a wall? Will that break my legs? Or just the wall? Or both? And what about the backlash?" Hikari said to aim for a spark, but how do you create a spark from an inferno? "And you, with the curly green hair!" A sharp, authoritative voice cut through his panicked monologue. A tall, well-built boy with glasses and dark blue hair stood up, pointing a rigid hand at him. "You have been muttering this entire time. It is distracting. If you are not taking this seriously, then you should leave." The spotlight turned on Izuku, and he hunched over, his face burning with shame. The boy then turned his attention to present Mike. "And furthermore, on the handout, there are 4 types of villains listed. If this is a misprint, it is a great shame upon a top-tier institution like UA. The nature of this 4th villain should be clarified." Present Mike grinned. All right, examinee 7111. Thanks for the call-in. The 4th villain type is a gimmick. An arena trap. It's worth 0 points. Think of it as a giant, lumbering obstacle to avoid." The boy in glasses bowed deeply. "Thank you for the clarification. I apologize for the interruption." Izuku just wanted the floor to swallow him whole. He filed away the information about the 0-pointer, avoid at all costs, and tried to quiet the roaring panic in his mind. He had to do this. He had to find a way. They were herded into buses and driven to their designated battle centers. Izuku found himself at Battle Center B, standing before a pair of colossal gates. He was surrounded by other examinees, all of whom looked confident, powerful, and ready. He saw the girl who had saved him earlier, psyching herself up. He saw the boy with glasses, stretching with disciplined precision. He felt like a fraud. He had the most powerful quirk on the planet coursing through his veins, and he was more terrified than he had ever been in his life. "An. Start!" Present Mick's voice blared from hidden speakers. Nothing happened. Everyone stood around, confused. "What's wrong? There are no countdowns in a real fight. Run! Run!" The gates burst open, and a wave of examinees surged forward. A boy with engines in his calves shot past. A kid with a laser firing from his navel took the lead. In seconds, Izuku was left standing alone in a cloud of dust, the sounds of explosions and tearing metal already echoing from within the city. "Move, move, move!" He screamed at himself, his legs finally unfreezing. He sprinted into the mock city, his heart hammering against his ribs. The scale of the place was staggering. It was a perfect replica of a downtown district, complete with skyscrapers, alleyways, and power lines. He saw his first target. A one-point robot rolled around a corner, its single red eye fixing on him. It was lean, agile, and armed with whirring blades. Okay. A spark. Just a spark, he thought, planting his feet. He closed his eyes and reached for the star inside him. The power roared to life, a tidal wave of energy threatening to drown him. It was too much. It was a wild, untamed god, and it would not be commanded. He tried to draw just a fraction of it, to channel it into his fist. "Clench your butt cheeks." All Might's voice echoed in his head. He clenched. He reared back his arm. And nothing happened. The power refused to obey. It was an all-or-nothing switch, and he was terrified to flip it. The robot lunged. Izuku yelped and scrambled out of the way just as its blades sliced through the air where his head had been. He fell backward, his chance gone. Another examinee, a girl with vine-like hair, whipped out and ensnared the robot, crushing it easily. "1 point," she said calmly, moving on. This was his nightmare. He ran through the streets, a frantic, powerless ghost in a war zone of quirks. Everywhere he looked, points were being scored. He saw a boy with a hardening quirk punch straight through a 2-pointer. He saw the bubbly girl from the entrance tapping robots, causing them to float helplessly into the air before crashing down. He saw Bakugo. Of course, Kaken was in his block, blasting his way through a whole swarm of them, a maniacal grin on his face. 7 minutes left, President Mike announced. 7 minutes? And he had 0 points. Not a single one. A wave of cold, heavy despair washed over him. He was going to fail. After 10 months of brutal, back-breaking labor. After all of Hikari's help, her sleepless nights, her unwavering belief. After All Might had chosen him, had given him this miraculous chance. He was going to fail them all. He stumbled into an alleyway, leaning against a wall, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The sounds of the battle seemed to fade away, replaced by the deafening roar of his own failure. He pictured Hikari's face when he told her. He pictured the light in her eyes dimming, the fragile hope they had built together crumbling into dust. He pictured All Might's disappointed smile. The shame was a physical weight, pressing down on him, suffocating him. No. I can't fail. I won't. He pushed himself off the wall, his eyes scanning the streets, desperate for an opportunity, any opportunity. 2 minutes remaining. It was over. There wasn't enough time. He had failed. And then the ground began to shake. It started as a low rumble, a tremor that rattled the windows in their frames. Then it grew into a violent, earth-shattering quake. A shadow fell over the entire street, a patch of unnatural night in the middle of the day. Izuku looked up, and his blood ran cold. Looming over the skyscrapers, its massive form eclipsing the sun, was the 0-pointer. It was a mechanical titan, a Goliath of green metal and black plating, easily 20 stories high. Its single red eye scanned the cityscape below, and its colossal arms swiped through buildings, sending concrete and steel raining down onto the streets. It was an overwhelming, terrifying force of nature. The 0-pointer! Someone screamed. The reaction was instantaneous. Everyone ran. The confident, powerful examinees who had been racking up points moments before were now a terrified mob, fleeing for their lives. It was just an obstacle. An arena trap. There was no point in fighting it. Izuku turned to run with them. That was the smart thing to do. The logical thing to do. Avoid the trap. Survive. Then he heard a small, pained cry. He stopped, turning back toward the chaos. There, in the path of the advancing giant, was the nice girl from the entrance. Ochako Uraraka. A large slab of concrete had pinned her leg, and she was struggling desperately to get free. Her face was pale with terror, as she looked up at the descending fist of the mechanical monster. She was trapped. She was helpless. And no one was coming to save her. In that moment, Izuku's world shifted on its axis. The roaring panic, the despair, the fear of failure, it all vanished, burned away by a singular, white-hot thought. He didn't see a stranger. He didn't see a fellow examinee. He saw Hikari. He saw his sister, small and vulnerable, trapped beneath the rubble of a world that was too big and too cruel. He saw the embodiment of every person he had ever sworn to protect, every innocent he had ever dreamed of saving. The abstract goal of heroism, the desperate desire for points, all of it became meaningless. There was only one thing that mattered. I'll protect you. The promise he'd made in a sun-drenched park a decade ago, whispered to a crying little girl. Come back in one piece, Hikari's voice pleaded in his mind. A hero can always find a way to break out of a tough spot, All Might's voice boomed. His legs coiled, the untamed son of one for all roaring to life within them. This time, he didn't try to reason with it. He didn't try to ask for a spark. He opened the floodgates. Power, raw and absolute, surged through him. It was more than he could handle, a universe of energy cramming itself into his mortal frame. He felt his muscles strain, his bones creak under the impossible pressure. He didn't care. From the bottom of his heart, he screamed, not with his voice, but with his very soul. He launched himself into the air. He wasn't running, he was flying. The ground fell away beneath him as he rocketed upward, a green blur of motion ascending past the 10th floor, the 15th, the 20th. He soared through the air, leveling with the robot's massive, impassive face. He pulled back his right arm, channeling the entirety of that cataclysmic power into his fist. The skin on his arm glowed, red veins of energy mapping a path of imminent self-destruction. He saw his target. He saw his sister's terrified face. And he let it all go. Detroit. Smash! The impact was apocalyptic. His fist connected with the robot's head, and the world dissolved into a cacophony of shrieking, twisting metal. A shockwave erupted from the point of impact, a visible dome of force that blasted outward, shattering every window for 3 blocks. The robot's head didn't just dent, it imploded, collapsing inward as a concussive wave of pure power tore through its internal mechanisms. The mechanical titan, a monster that had seemed invincible seconds before, was annihilated. Its head crumpled like a tin can, and its colossal body, now headless, tilted backward and crashed into the buildings behind it, utterly destroyed. For a single, glorious moment, Izuku hung in the air, a silhouette against the sun, the victor. Then, the price came due. A wave of unimaginable pain ripped through his body. He looked down and saw his right arm, the one that had delivered the blow, now a mangled, purple ruin. It was broken in at least 3 places, dangling uselessly at his side. The backlash didn't stop there. The force of his jump had been too much for his legs. He felt a sickening, simultaneous crack in both of them. They were shattered. The adrenaline vanished, replaced by searing agony. Gravity reasserted its claim, and he began to fall. The ground rushed up to meet him, a hard, unforgiving promise of a final, fatal impact. This is it, he thought, a strange sense of calm washing over him. I saved her. I kept my promise. 0 points. A broken body. But he had saved her. Maybe that was enough. He closed his eyes, waiting for the end. Slap! A hand slapped his cheek, and the feeling of terminal velocity vanished. He was suddenly weightless, floating gently a few feet from the ground. He opened his eyes to see Uraraka, her face green with nausea from the effort, holding one hand out toward him. Release! She gasped, and he fell the last few feet with a soft thud. She then promptly threw up from overexerting her quirk. Time's up! President Mick's voice screamed, signaling the end of the exam. Izuku lay on the broken pavement, his body a symphony of pain. He had done it. He had used one for all. And it had cost him everything. He had 0 villain points. He was broken. He had failed the exam, but he had saved someone. The conflict tore him apart as a tiny, elderly woman in a hero costume, the youthful heroine, recovery girl, made her way through the crowd and planted a kiss on his forehead. The pain began to recede, replaced by an overwhelming, bone-deep exhaustion as his body used its own energy to heal. The bus ride home was silent and miserable. He was physically and emotionally hollowed out. He had failed. The week that followed was one of the longest of Izuku's life. He was confined to his room, his body aching with a phantom pain from the memory of his injuries. The mail slot was a source of constant, terrifying anticipation. He ignored All Might's calls and texts, too ashamed to face his mentor. How could he explain that he had been given the ultimate power, and had managed to score a perfect 0? Hikari was his anchor. She didn't press him. She just sat with him, sometimes reading aloud from one of his favorite hero biographies, other times just being a quiet, comforting presence. Her belief in him hadn't wavered, but he could see the strain in her eyes. His failure was her failure too. Finally, the letter came. It was thick. Too thick for a rejection notice. Inko brought it to his room, her hands trembling. Izuku stared at it, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. He couldn't open it. He couldn't face the final confirmation of his failure. We'll see it together, Hikari said, her voice firm. She took the envelope from his shaking hands and carefully opened it. A small metal disc fell out onto his desk. It flickered to life, projecting a holographic image into the air. All Might, in his full muscle form, appeared before them. I am here, as a projection, he boomed. Young Midoriya. I know you've been avoiding me. But I am not here to scold you. I am here to tell you your results. Izuku flinched, bracing himself. You passed the written exam with flying colors, of course, All Might continued. But on the practical exam, you scored a resounding 0. In villain points, Izuku's heart sank. It was official. Ordinarily, All Might said, a grin spreading across his face, that would mean failure. But, he raised a finger. The screen behind him changed, showing footage from the exam. It showed Uraraka approaching President Mike after the test. Excuse me, her voice said, small but determined. That boy with the curly green hair, he has 0 points, doesn't he? But he saved me. He jumped in when no one else would. Can't you give him some of my points? The scene shifted back to All Might. A request to transfer points after the fact. Your actions inspired others to act, my boy. But you didn't need her points. Do you really think an institution like UA would run an exam that discounts selfless, heroic acts? He pointed dramatically at the screen. While the other examinees ran, you charged forward. For the UA Hero Course exam is not just about defeating villains. Another scoreboard appeared. Next to Izuku's name, under the villain points column, was a 0. But next to it, a new column appeared, rescue points. A panel of judges watches every performance. And we award points for heroism, Izuku Midoriya, for your act of unparalleled bravery and self-sacrifice in saving a fellow examinee. You have been awarded 60 rescue points. The number glowed on the screen. 60, more than enough. Ochako Uraraka, 45 points. Both of you pass. All Might declared. He looked directly at Izuku, his holographic eyes filled with pride. So come, young Midoriya. This is your hero academia. The projection flickered out, leaving the room in silence. Izuku stared at the spot where All Might had been, his mind reeling. Rescue points. He hadn't failed. He had succeeded in the most important way possible. A sob escaped his lips, a raw, ragged sound of disbelief and overwhelming relief. He had done it. He had actually done it. Hikari was crying too, silent tears of joy streaming down her face. She threw her arms around him, hugging him tightly, her small frame shaking with emotion. You did it, Nichan, she wept into his shoulder. You really did it. Inko stood in the doorway, her hand over her mouth, her own tears flowing freely. Her son, her brave, foolish, wonderful son, was going to UA. Izuku hugged his sister back, clutching the acceptance letter in his hand. It wasn't just paper and ink. It was the culmination of 10 months of agony and 10 years of a steadfast promise. It was proof that a quirkless boy's spirit, combined with the love and support of his sister, could overcome any obstacle. He looked at Hikari, a new, steely resolve hardening in his gaze. This wasn't the end of their struggle. This wasn't the finish line. This was the first hurdle, cleared at a terrible cost. The real work, the real danger, was only just beginning. But for the first time, the path forward was not a desperate dream, but a gleaming reality. And they would walk it together. The first day at Yue High felt less like a day of school and more like a pilgrimage. Every step Izuku took down the polished, sun-drenched hallways felt historic, monumental. He walked past towering windows that offered breathtaking views of the campus grounds, past display cases filled with the support items of legendary alumni, past students with quirks so varied and vibrant it was like walking through a living, breathing art exhibit. A girl with crystalline skin laughed with a boy whose hair was made of what looked like living kelp. It was a world of wonders, and he, Izuku Midoriya, was now a part of it. His heart, a hummingbird trapped in his ribcage, beat a frantic rhythm of excitement and terror. The memory of the entrance exam, the soaring flight, the apocalyptic smash, the searing pain, was a fresh, vivid brand on his soul. He had the power, but it was a feral beast on a fraying leash. He had one shot, one explosive, self-destructive trick. He wasn't a hero. He was a glass cannon, and he was walking into a school full of living weapons. He found the door to Class 1A. It was colossal, a testament to the school's need to accommodate every possible body type and quirk. Taking a deep, fortifying breath, he pushed it open. The scene inside was already one of controlled chaos. He immediately spotted the stern, well-mannered boy from the exam briefing, the one who had called him out for muttering, arguing with another student. "Take your feet off the desk," the boy with glasses commanded, his arms chopping the air with rigid precision. "Such an action is an insult to our upperclassmen and the craftsmen who made these desks." Lounging with an air of supreme indifference, his feet propped up on the desk, was Katsuki Bakugo. Izuku froze. Of course. Of course Kaken had made it into 1A. A part of him had hoped they would be in different classes, that he would have a chance to start fresh without the shadow of their shared, toxic history looming over him. Bakugo glanced up, his crimson eyes filled with lazy contempt. "The hell you say? What junior high you from, you stuck-up extra?" The boy with glasses stood ramrod straight. "I am from semi-private academy. My name is Tenya Ida." "Semi?" Bakugo sneered. "So you're a damn elite then. Looks like I'll have fun crushing you." Ida recoiled, aghast. "Crushing me? That is a barbaric sentiment for an aspiring hero." His eyes then scanned the room and landed on Izuku, who was trying his best to become invisible in the doorway. Ida's entire demeanor changed. He strode over, his hand outstretched. "It's you!" he boomed. "Good morning. I am Tenya Ida, I heard." Izuku squeaked, his posture immediately defensive. "I'm Izuku Midoriya. It's a pleasure to meet you, Midoriya-kun," Ida said, his expression turning serious. "I must apologize. I misjudged you completely at the briefing. You perceived the true nature of the practical exam, didn't you? While I was focused on the obvious, you understood the deeper meaning of heroism. I was bested by you. As expected of you." Before Izuku could process this strangely formal and intense apology, a cheerful voice cut in from behind him. "Oh! It's you! The plain-looking boy who passed." He turned to see Ochako Uraraka, the girl he'd saved, her round face beaming. "That punch was amazing! A real smash! And you were all like blah, and whoosh! It was incredible!" She mimed a wild punch, her energy infectious. Izuku's face went supernova red. "Ah, thank you, it was nothing, you saved me too," he stammered, his brain melting into a puddle of social anxiety. The sudden, friendly chatter around Izuku drew Bakugo's attention. His eyes narrowed, a slow, dangerous fire beginning to burn in their depths. He didn't understand. How was Deku here? The quirkless, useless, pathetic pebble he had been kicking around his entire life. How had he not only gotten into UA but also seemingly annihilated that zero-pointer? It didn't make sense. It was a puzzle with a missing piece, and Bakugo hated puzzles. If you're all here to make friends, then you can pack up and leave. A new voice, low and lethargic, drifted from the floor. The three of them turned to see a man lying on the ground in a yellow sleeping bag, looking for all the world like a giant, exhausted caterpillar. He took a slow sip from a juice pouch. "Welcome to UA's hero course," he said, his voice devoid of any emotion. He slowly unzipped himself and stood up. He was a tall, thin man with tired, bloodshot eyes, a wild mane of black hair, and a scarf that seemed to defy gravity. "It took you all 8 seconds to quiet down. That's not going to work. Time is a precious resource. You can't afford to waste it." He scanned the room, his gaze lingering on each student for a fraction of a second too long, as if cataloging their weaknesses. "I'm your homeroom teacher, Shota Aizawa." A collective wave of recognition rippled through the class. Shota Aizawa. The erasure hero, Eraserhead. An underground hero famous for taking on entire gangs of villains by himself, his existence more myth than media sensation. Izuku's mind raced, pulling up the file he had on him. A quirk that could nullify other quirks, a master of stealth and ambush tactics, a specialist in using his capture weapon. Aizawa pulled a gym uniform out of his sleeping bag. "Right. Get changed into these and meet me on the P grounds." Now, the locker room was a tense, buzzing space. Izuku changed quickly, trying to avoid eye contact, particularly with Bakugo, whose silent, burning glare he could feel on his back. He was deeply guarded about his home life, a habit born from years of protecting Hikari from the world's judgment. He couldn't afford to let anyone get close enough to ask questions, to notice the way he constantly checked his phone, or the way his conversations were peppered with strange, clinical jargon about energy conversion and backlash management. On the field, Aizawa waited, his expression as impassive as stone. "A quirk assessment test?" Uraraka asked, echoing the confusion of the class. "But what about the entrance ceremony? Or orientation? A waste of time," Aizawa said flatly. "If you want to be heroes, you don't have time for frilly, pointless events. UA is known for its freedom in teaching styles, and that applies to the teachers as well. You've all been doing these tests since junior high. Long jump, 50-meter dash, grip strength. But you were never allowed to use your quirks. It's irrational. The country still insists on treating all students as if they're on an equal footing. It's a waste of potential." He turned his gaze on Bakugo. "Bakugo, you finished first in the practical exam. What was your best score for the softball throw in junior high?" 67 meters. Bakugo grunted. "Right. Try it with your quirk," Aizawa said, tossing him a softball. "Do whatever you want, as long as you stay in the circle." Bakugo grinned, a feral, predatory expression. He wound up, a small explosion crackling in his palm. "Daithai!" he roared, launching the ball with a massive, targeted explosion. The ball shot into the sky, a tiny comet propelled by pure, aggressive power. Aizawa looked at the device in his hand. 705.2 meters. The class erupted in excited chatter. 705 meters? This looks like fun. We can use our quirks as much as we want. Fun? Aizawa's voice dropped, and the temperature on the field seemed to plummet with it. Fun, you say? You have 3 years here to become heroes. You think it's all going to be fun? Idiots. His lips curled into a humorless smile. All right. New rule. The student who scores lowest in total points across all 8 tests will be judged to have no potential, and will be expelled immediately. Panic. Pure, unadulterated panic ripped through the class. Expulsion? On the first day? This wasn't a game. This was a crucible. Izuku felt a cold dread seize him. His mind raced, calculating, panicking. He had one move. One all-or-nothing, self-destructing punch. He couldn't use it for the 50-meter dash. He couldn't use it for the grip strength test. The softball throw was his only chance to show Aizawa what he was capable of. But if he broke his arm on the first major test, he'd be useless for the rest. He would be last. He would be expelled. The test began, and Izuku's personal hell continued. 50-meter dash. Ida used his engine quirk to cross the line in 3.04 seconds. Aoyama used his naval laser to propel himself backward. Azuritsu used her frog-like tongue to pull herself forward. Izuku ran it in 7.02 seconds, a painfully average, quirkless time. He saw the flicker of confusion in Aizawa's eyes. Grip strength. A large, multi-armed student named Shoji scored 540 kilograms. Izuku, despite his 10 months of training, managed a respectable but ultimately unimpressive 56 kilograms. Standing long jump, he cleared the sandbox, but just barely. Side-to-side steps. He was a clumsy, uncoordinated mess. He was failing miserably. In every test, he was forced to perform like the quirkless boy he used to be, because the alternative was a single, explosive burst of power that would render him useless. He was dead last, and the softball throw was his final chance. He stepped into the circle, the ball feeling heavy and cold in his hand. He could feel the eyes of his classmates on him. He could feel Aizawa's judgmental stare. Most of all, he could feel Bakugo's glare, a mixture of confusion and contempt. "What are you doing, Deku? Where's the power you used on that robot? Show it to me, you damn liar." "Okay." A spark. Just a spark, he thought, channeling Hikari's advice. He reared back, trying to call upon just a sliver of one for all, enough to give the ball a boost without shattering his bones. He focused the power into his fingertip, a tiny pinprick of the raging sun within him. He brought his arm forward, and the power vanished. The ball left his hand with a pathetic thud, landing a mere 46 meters away. I was trying to use it," Izuku stammered, confused. The power had been there, and then it was gone. "I erased your quirk," Aizawa said, his voice a low growl. His black hair was floating around his head, his eyes glowing a menacing red, and the strange scarf around his neck was unfurling like angry serpents. "That entrance exam was not rational. A person like you, who would cripple himself to save one person, would be a liability in a real fight. You'd save one person only to be taken out of the fight, forcing another hero to save you. You can't be a hero with that kind of one-track mindset." He released his quirk, and his hair fell back into place. "I've returned your quirk. You have one more throw. Get it done, and let's move on." Aizawa's words struck Izuku harder than any physical blow. A liability. He was right. That's exactly what had happened. He had saved Uraraka, but he had become useless, a broken body waiting for rescue. That wasn't being a hero. That was being a burden. Hikari's warning echoed in his mind, "Come back in one piece." He had failed that too. He stood in the circle, the second ball in his hand. The weight of the world was on his shoulders. He could use 100% and break his arm, proving he had power but also proving Aizawa's point. Or he could throw it normally and accept his expulsion. But there had to be another way. He thought of his training. He thought of Hikari. Control, not suppression. The power was all or nothing, an on-off switch. But what if he could flick that switch at the last possible second? What if he could contain the explosion to a single point of impact, minimizing the catastrophic damage to the rest of his body? It was a terrifying gamble. He wound up, his mind clear, his objective singular. He poured all of one for all into his arm, feeling the familiar, agonizing pressure build. The power surged, ready to tear him apart. But this time, just as he was about to release the ball, he focused everything, his will, his training, his promise, into the very tip of his index finger. He threw. At the last possible nanosecond, he released the power. There was a sonic boom, a crack of displaced air that sent a shockwave across the field. The ball shot forward, leaving a trail of vapor in its wake. And the pain, oh God, the pain, was immense. But it was contained. His arm wasn't a mangled purple mess. It was still intact. But his index finger, it was swollen, purple, and grotesquely broken. He looked at Aizawa, his eyes watering from the agony, but a triumphant, defiant grin on his face. "Sensei," he said through gritted teeth. I can still move." Aizawa watched the device in his hand beep. 705.3 meters. He looked at Izuku's broken finger, at the boy's pain-filled but determined expression. A slow, wide, almost demonic grin spread across Aizawa's face. "This kid," he breathed. "He's interesting." The rest of the class stared in stunned silence. Bakugo's jaw was on the floor. His score, beaten by a fraction of a meter. By Deku. The rage that had been simmering inside him erupted. "Deku, you bastard!" he roared, explosions popping in his palms as he lunged forward. "Tell me how you did that or you're dead!" Before he could reach Izuku, Aizawa's capture weapon shot out, wrapping around Bakugo and immobilizing him instantly. "Stand down," Aizawa said, his eyes glowing red again. "Stop making me use my quirk. I've got dry eye." The rest of the tests passed in a blur of pain for Izuku. He managed to get through them, his performance hampered by his injury but driven by a new surge of adrenaline. Finally, the results were posted. Izuku scanned the list, his heart in his throat. He looked for his name at the bottom. But it wasn't there. He was 20th. Dead last was a short, purple-haired boy named Minoru Mineta. "Oh, and by the way," Aizawa said, his back to the class, "that whole expulsion thing was a lie." The class erupted. "A lie? Of course it was," said a tall, beautiful girl with a black ponytail. "It was a logical ruse to draw out our full potential. It should have been obvious," Yaoyoro Zumomo said, though most of the class looked as shocked as Izuku felt. Aizawa just shrugged. "That's it for today. There are handouts in the classroom with the curriculum. Now go to the nurse's office, Midoriya." He handed him a slip and walked away, leaving a class of stunned, exhausted, and deeply confused teenagers in his wake. After a visit to Recovery Girl, who healed his finger with a kiss and left him feeling utterly drained, Izuku began the slow, weary walk to the school gates. The day had been a brutal, emotional roller coaster. He had faced failure, expulsion, and excruciating pain, but he had survived. More than that, he had learned something vital. He wasn't just a glass cannon. He could control it. It would hurt, but he could do it. He saw a familiar figure waiting for him just outside the main gate, standing under the shade of a sakura tree. It was Hikari. She was holding 2 bottles of water, her school bag at her feet. She looked up as he approached, her eyes immediately flicking to his bandaged hand, then to his exhausted face. "You're hurt," she said, her voice soft with concern. "It wasn't a question, just a finger," he said, trying for a reassuring smile. "Recovery Girl fixed it. It's better than a whole arm." She handed him a water bottle. "I told you to aim for a spark." "I did," he said, taking a long drink. "Turns out a spark from a sun is still pretty big." They started the walk home, the comfortable silence between them a welcome balm after the chaos of the day. "So, how was it?" she asked finally. "Your class? It was a lot," he admitted. He told her about Aizawa-sensei, about the surprise quirk test, about the threat of expulsion. He told her about Ida and Uraraka. "They seem nice," she said hopefully. "They are," he agreed. Then his expression darkened slightly. "Kaken is in my class." Hikari flinched. The name Bakugo was synonymous with years of torment, not just for Izuku, but for her by proxy. His taunts about her being a freak were some of her worst memories. "He saw me use one for all," Izuku continued, his voice low. "He doesn't understand it. He's angry. More than usual." Just then, a voice cut through the afternoon air behind them. "Oh, Deku!" They both tensed. It was Bakugo. He was stomping toward them, his expression a thunderous mask of rage. His eyes flicked from Izuku to Hikari, and his lip curled into a sneer. "So, the freak show came to meet you?" He spat, his gaze lingering on Hikari with undisguised contempt. She instinctively took a step behind Izuku, trying to make herself smaller. Izuku's posture shifted immediately. He moved to stand more fully in front of her, his body language screaming protector. A low, warning growl rumbled in his chest, an involuntary sound he wasn't even aware he'd made. "What do you want, Kaken?" Bakugo ignored him, his focus still on Hikari. "What, you scared I might get too close? Afraid you might accidentally suck the life out of me, you little vampire?" The insult, so casual and cruel, struck Hikari like a slap. Tears pricked at her eyes, and she bit her lip to keep from crying out. Before Izuku could retort, they were interrupted. Midoriya-kun! Ida and Uraraka were jogging to catch up to them. They skidded to a halt, sensing the thick, toxic tension in the air. Is everything alright here? Ida asked, his eyes narrowing at Bakugo's aggressive stance. Uraraka looked from Bakugo's snarling face to Hikari, who was visibly trembling behind her brother. Her friendly expression hardened with a protective instinct of her own. Hey, what's your problem? Leave them alone, Bakugo scoffed, looking at the newcomers with disgust. Stay away from Deku, extras. You might catch whatever his freak sister has. The word freak hung in the air, ugly and sharp. Uraraka's eyes widened in shock, not just at the cruelty of the insult, but at the raw, venomous hatred behind it. Ida looked appalled, his sense of justice and decorum deeply offended. That is an unacceptable and villainous thing to say, Ida declared, chopping the air. You will apologize immediately. For the first time, Bakugo's attention was fully diverted from the Midoriyas. His rage, a wild, untamed thing, now had new targets. What did you say to me, Four Eyes? Izuku saw his chance. While Bakugo was distracted by Ida and Uraraka, he grabbed Hikari's hand. Let's go, he whispered urgently. He pulled her away, breaking into a half-jog, leaving the confrontation behind. They didn't stop until they had rounded several corners, and the angry shouting had faded into the distance. Izuku's heart was pounding, not from fear for himself, but from a white-hot, protective fury. He looked at Hikari. She was trying to hide it, but silent tears were tracing paths down her cheeks. I'm sorry, he said, his voice thick with guilt. I shouldn't have let him. It's not your fault, she whispered, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. It's always been like this. It shouldn't be, he insisted, his fists clenching. He hated this. He hated that his new life, his dream, was already being poisoned by the same old nightmare. But then, he thought of Ada and Uraraka. They had stood up for them. They hadn't known the full story, hadn't understood the history, but they had seen an injustice and had acted. They hadn't shied away from Bakugo's rage. They had stepped in. A small, hopeful thought broke through his anger. Maybe Yui would be different. Maybe he wouldn't have to be her only shield anymore. When they finally got home, Izuku went straight to his room. Hikari followed a moment later, finding him staring at his reflection in the dark screen of his monitor. Nichan, I'm going to get stronger, he said, his voice quiet but filled with a new, unshakable resolve. I'm going to master this quirk. Not just so I can be a hero, but so that no one, not Kaken, not anyone, will ever be able to look at you with anything but respect. I'll become so strong that my presence alone will be enough to protect you. Hikari looked at her brother, at the fierce determination in his eyes. She saw the hero he was becoming, not just in power, but in spirit. And she knew her role was changing too. She couldn't just be the person he protected. She had to become stronger too. For him, the first day was over. The battle lines had been drawn, alliances had been hinted at, and the true, brutal nature of their chosen path had been laid bare. It was a world of quirks and classes, of rivalries and friendships, of pain and potential. And for Izuku and Hikari, it was a world they would have to navigate together, one day at a time.